They say you never really know someone until you've seen them at their worst. I used to think that was just some Hallmark-sounding quote people tossed around after a messy breakup. Back then, I thought I knew Emily inside and out. We'd been together for 6 years, and in my head that meant something permanent, unshakable. We had built a rhythm, the kind only time can give you. Saturday morning coffee runs, the way she always sang off-key in the shower. The long drives through Austin's back roads just to talk about nothing. She was my anchor when my career stalled, my partner in crime when bills piled up, the person I thought I'd kneel in front of with a ring someday. But here's the thing about anchors, they can also drag you under. It was November 2021, one of those crisp nights in Austin, when the air carried a bite sharp enough to remind you it wasn't summer anymore. I was helping Emily's younger brother, Jason, with his iPad because his screen kept freezing. He was sprawled across our couch, more interested in the basketball game flickering on TV than in whether I fixed his homework lifeline. I remember laughing because the kid hadn't even thanked me, just tossed the iPad in my lap and asked if I could make it work like new. That's when I saw her name pop up on the Messages app, not mine, hers. Emily's account had synced to his iPad through the family cloud. At first, I didn't think much of it. We trusted each other, or at least I thought we did. I scrolled lazily through old group texts, memes she'd sent her friends, the usual nonsense. But then a name stood out, just 3 letters, JBC. The tone of the messages hit me first, different, personal, teasing in a way that cut. She was mocking me, joking about how I snored, how I always forgot where I put my keys, even making fun of the way I worded texts. And then came the gut punch, I miss you, I love you. Words she had said to me that morning, now duplicated to someone else, typed out like spare change. I just sat there staring at the screen while Jason yelled at the TV. My stomach turned. It felt like I'd swallowed ice water spreading through every vein. For 6 years, I thought Emily and I were building something real. In a blink, all I saw were cracks. I didn't say anything that night. I closed the app, handed the iPad back to Jason, and pretended like nothing happened. Emily came home later, smiling, carrying takeout Thai food, kissing me on the cheek like she hadn't gutted me hours earlier, and I smiled back, playing my role because I didn't know what else to do. But from that night on, I wasn't really there anymore. I became an actor in my own life, pretending, nodding, laughing at her jokes while secretly replaying every text, every word I'd read. I poured whiskey into my coffee on mornings I couldn't face her, told coworkers I was tired when really I hadn't slept a minute. The truth was eating me alive, but I swallowed it down because I needed a plan. I started keeping records. Every night while she showered or scrolled through Instagram, I'd print copies of those messages, stacking them in a folder hidden in my closet, 75 pages in total. Her lies in black and white, my proof. I also met with a lawyer. I told him I wasn't married but shared a lease, a bank account, and a dog. He gave me the rundown, what was mine, what I'd lose, what I needed to secure before walking away. Cold, clinical, but I listened carefully, nodding like this was some business negotiation and not my life unraveling. The hardest part wasn't reading the messages or plotting the exit. It was lying beside her at night, feeling her reach for my hand in the dark, hearing her whisper, I love you, Michael. And when I knew she was typing the same words to someone else, betrayal comes quietly. It seeps in. It sits with you at the dinner table, watches TV with you, and kisses you goodnight. And the worst part, you let it because you're not ready to face what comes next. I watched her carefully, observing patterns, listening for lies, waiting for the moment when I could confront her without losing control. It felt like living inside a war movie where I had no weapons but had to survive. Emily didn't know I knew yet, and I intended to keep it that way. One Friday night, she said she was going to a spa weekend with friends. I knew JBC was flying in because I had quietly checked her credit card activity, an invasion of privacy I told myself was necessary. My chest tightened as I followed her car from a distance. She didn't notice, not even when I parked down the street from South Congress Avenue and watched her enter the hotel. My stomach knotted when I saw her hand slip into JBC's. I approached slowly, fold her in hand, like a man carrying a grenade, but determined not to explode. Emily, I said, soft but steady. You can either walk out of this hotel and move your things out of my apartment tonight, or I show these messages to your parents, your coworkers, and every friend who thinks you're loyal. She froze, tears filling her eyes. JBC tried to step in, but I didn't even acknowledge him. Emily's voice cracked as she begged. I didn't mean it. It was just, please don't do this. But I wasn't there to reconcile. I wanted to protect myself. Walking away from someone you've loved this long doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like a knife in your chest with no anesthetic. That night I went home exhausted, heart pounding. I placed the folder where I knew she'd find it if she came back, quietly ensuring the shame landed where it mattered without a public spectacle. Sleep didn't come easily. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the nights I'd trusted her, all the meals shared, all the laughter. Betrayal is a ghost. You feel it in every room, every sound, every moment of quiet. The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls, attempts to reach closure, and careful planning to secure my assets. Emily kept calling, alternating between anger, sadness, and pleading. I didn't answer. I blocked her from social media, but still she found ways to contact me. Texts from different numbers, emails disguised as work messages. I became paranoid, constantly checking locks and cameras, hyper-aware of every sound. Rusty became my anchor. He seemed to know I was tense, curling beside me while I scrolled through the printed messages, reminding me of the life I could still control. I had to be careful. One wrong move could trigger a confrontation I wasn't ready for. Then came the evening Emily showed up at my apartment unannounced. My heart skipped a beat, but I stayed calm. I didn't open the door immediately, and when I did, I maintained composure. "Emily," I said, voice steady, "we've been through this. Leave." She tried to smile, tried to charm, but it didn't work anymore. She had lost control of me. I called the police when she lingered too long, and eventually she left. The finality of it hit me, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. Over the next months, I rebuilt myself. The apartment became mine. I arranged locks, cameras, and routines that reminded me I was reclaiming control. I began therapy, learning how to process not just the betrayal, but the long-term emotional damage. Emily was still in my life peripherally. Calls from her family, messages from mutual friends, but her influence over me waned. The hardest part wasn't winning the argument or exposing her lies. It was the lingering question. How could someone I loved so deeply, someone I trusted with every secret, laugh at my pain and carry on as if it didn't exist? I realized I couldn't change her or the past. I could only protect myself, set boundaries, and take back control of my life. By the time a year had passed, I felt stronger. I had Rusty, my apartment, my friends, and my sense of self intact. Emily's texts continued occasionally, polite at first, then desperate. I didn't respond. I had learned a hard lesson. Love doesn't justify betrayal. Trust is earned, but once broken, no apology can fully mend it. I focus now on what matters. My work, my relationships with people who respect me, and my own boundaries. The betrayal taught me vigilance, self-respect, and the value of confronting reality rather than burying it. I no longer let the ghost of Emily dictate my peace. Sometimes I think about her, not with anger, not with pain, just a factual recognition of the danger she represented and the lessons I carry. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. Love without respect and honesty is not love, it's a risk. Protect yourself. Observe closely and never ignore your instincts. Boundaries are not a weakness, they are the armor that keeps your heart safe. They say the first big move in your 20s shapes the person you become. I never really believed it until that spring of 2018, standing at the gate in Seattle with Rachel dragging her rolling suitcase behind her and Ethan packing beside her, trying to keep his expression calm. I watched them from a distance as she hugged him, the kind of hug that squeezes so tight you can feel someone's heartbeat, the way you feel it in a room when someone you love isn't coming back for a while. Rachel had always been ambitious. The promotion in Portland was exactly the kind of opportunity she wanted. Creative freedom, more responsibility, a chance to make a name for herself. I understood that. I cheered for her even though it meant stretching our friendship and relationships thin. But Ethan and Rachel had been together for 2 years, and everyone, including me, assumed they were inseparable. People said they're the forever couple, the kind of statement that makes you want to roll your eyes, but in this case it felt true. At the airport, Ethan's voice shook when he said, "We'll make this work, I promise. Every weekend, every call, nothing changes." He tried to smile through the tension in his shoulders, and Rachel nodded, teary-eyed, brushing strands of hair from her face. They laughed awkwardly, joking about how he better not embarrass himself in Portland with his cooking disasters or karaoke habits. There was warmth, there was love, and there was that unspoken fear of the unknown. The first few months went as promised. Long video calls each night, good morning texts, photos of their lunches, selfies with goofy faces. Ethan even drove down to Portland every other weekend, surprising Rachel with flowers, small gifts, and little notes tucked into her bag. On the surface, everything seemed intact, but as summer approached, subtle changes began. Rachel would skip calls, claim she was exhausted from work or that team dinners ran late. Ethan didn't see it as a red flag. He trusted her, believed in her, and ignored the tiny frictions as growing pains of distance. But growing pains aren't always innocent. By July, Ethan began noticing the pattern too clearly. Rachel canceled planned visits, blamming unavoidable deadlines. Calls shrank to short audio check-ins. When Ethan tried to discuss long-term plans, trips, visits, even casual weekends, she skillfully shifted the conversation elsewhere. Ethan's best friend Mark noticed his frustration and said bluntly over beers one night, "Man, she's slipping away. You feel it too, don't you?" Ethan did, but hope was sticky. Love makes us cling to illusions even when the signs are right in front of our faces. That Friday night in July, Ethan reached a breaking point. Rachel had canceled yet another visit, citing a sudden work obligation. He couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore. Without telling her, he drove 3 hours south to Portland, imagining how surprised she would be. Maybe she would laugh at him, tease him about being paranoid. Maybe it would be a warm reunion that restored his confidence in their love. By the time he arrived, it was nearly 10 p.m. He parked a few blocks from her apartment, heart pounding with anticipation. As he walked past a small cafe near her building, he froze. Through the window, Rachel was sitting with a man Ethan had never seen. She leaned forward, her hand resting gently in his, laughing like she hadn't in months. Not with Ethan, at least. Time slowed. Ethan felt every second stretch painfully, his fists clenched at his sides. For months, he had excused canceled trips, late-night work calls, and awkward silences. He had told himself she was stressed, adjusting. He had trusted her. And now in this tiny Portland cafe, reality hit him like a freight train. Rachel had moved on. When she glanced toward the window, her face went pale. She whispered something to the man, who turned toward Ethan briefly, then shrugged as if nothing mattered. Rachel came outside, voice low, trembling. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said, eyes wet with guilt. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat over the city hum. "How long?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible. "Since June," she admitted. "I didn't know how to end it with you. I didn't want to hurt you," but he couldn't finish her sentence. His legs moved before his mind could catch up. Without yelling, without demanding an explanation, he walked away numb. He returned to his car and drove back to Seattle in silence, replaying every lie, every canceled trip, every excuse he had accepted as truth. In the weeks following that night, Ethan tried to find peace. He stopped checking his phone compulsively. He deleted Rachel from social media, muted memories of their FaceTime calls, tried to fill the void with friends and work, but ghosts have a way of lingering. Every time he passed that cafe on a business trip to Portland, he felt the cold pit in his stomach, the memory of her hand in someone else's. He realized the betrayal wasn't just her moving on. It was how she had kept him tethered while her feelings had already shifted. He remembered the little excuses that now looked absurd. Too tired to call, stuck at work, deadline, emergency. None of them had been true. She hadn't been too busy. She had been making a choice, choosing convenience over honesty, fear over confrontation. Ethan's nights became restless. Sleep was haunted by imagined confrontations, by voices he could no longer trust. He felt anger, but more than that, a deep sadness. Love, he realized, doesn't die quietly. It fades in pieces, sometimes leaving no warning and sometimes leaving you staring through a cafe window at the person you once adored. Months passed. He tried dating again cautiously, knowing the shadows of Rachel's betrayal followed him. Each new connection was tested against old scars. Trust came slowly, if at all. He began journaling, pouring his thoughts onto paper, analyzing what went wrong, not to dwell but to understand. Through it all, one lesson became clear. People often carry two lives. The one they show you and the one they keep hidden. Rachel had mastered that duality, presenting a loving partner while cultivating another relationship in secret. Ethan learned to accept that not all love is pure or permanent, and that heartbreak isn't always dramatic. It can be subtle, quiet, and cold. Years later, Ethan drives through Portland occasionally for work. He passes that same cafe and still feels the chill of that night. Not anger, not despair, just clarity. He knows he loved someone who had already let go, and that's the haunting truth. The betrayal doesn't always come with confrontation. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a hand held in someone else's. He's moved on cautiously. He's learned to value transparency, honesty, and boundaries. Love is precious, but trust is fragile, and once broken, it cannot always be fully restored. He no longer waits by windows, no longer clings to hope for those who have already chosen otherwise. He protects his heart, knowing it's his most valuable possession. Love can be complicated, but deception and hidden choices are never love. Trust is earned, not assumed. And patience doesn't justify being strung along. Recognize red flags, honor your own worth, and never cling to someone who has quietly already let go. True love respects honesty. Anything less is a lesson, not a loss. They always told me to be careful when meeting people online. And yet I convinced myself I was different. I was cautious, thoughtful, and not the type to make rash decisions. But there I was, a rainy Friday night in October 2019, walking through the slick streets of downtown Denver toward a bar I'd been to dozens of times, waiting for someone I'd only ever known through messages and photos on Tinder. I had matched with Ryan a few weeks earlier. At first, our conversations were light-hearted. Memes, jokes about grad school, coffee preferences, but over time he became more persistent, more familiar, and I started feeling comfortable enough to finally agree to meet. My friends had teased me endlessly about always backing out at the last minute. "You'll flake, Sophie," my roommate laughed as I slid my denim jacket on, "but maybe this time you won't." I smiled nervously, pocketing my phone, sending her my location just in case. The bar was warm, a mix of amber lights and chatter, music pulsing softly through the air. I found a small table in the corner and fidgeted with my phone, glancing at the door every few minutes. 15 minutes passed, then 30, and Ryan still hadn't shown. Finally, a text from him appeared. "Sorry, traffic, be there soon." I exhaled slowly, took a sip of my drink, and tried to shake off the jittery feeling in my stomach. That's when he appeared. He slid into the seat across from me without asking. A man who looked much older than me, late 40s, maybe early 50s. "You look too pretty to be sitting alone," he said, his grin unsettling like it stretched just a little too wide. I forced a polite smile, telling him I was waiting for someone, hoping he'd take the hint and leave, but he didn't. Instead, he asked question after question, ignoring my attempts to disengage. I quickly texted Ryan explaining what was happening. His reply made me freeze. "Don't worry, just have a drink while you wait, I'll be there soon." The calm encouragement unsettled me. Why would a stranger, someone I had never met, encourage me to stay in a situation that clearly made me uncomfortable? The older man returned later, this time leaning closer. "So this guy you're meeting, he's younger, right? Doesn't know how to take care of a woman like you." My chest tightened. He knew about Ryan. How did he know I was waiting for someone? My pulse raced. I excused myself to the bathroom, pulling my phone from my pocket and whispering into it as I called Sophie. I told her exactly what was happening. The way the man had ignored my body language, how Ryan's messages didn't make sense. She was furious over the phone, telling me to leave immediately, but leaving felt dangerous. What if he followed me outside? I stalled, washing my hands slowly, pretending to linger, hoping he wouldn't notice my movement. When I returned to my table, the man was gone. I paid my tab quickly, barely glancing at anyone else, and left. The rain had picked up, streaking down my windshield in blurred lines, matching the chaos I felt in my chest. As I drove through the empty streets toward my apartment, headlights suddenly appeared behind me, following me for several blocks. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles were white. I pulled into my apartment complex and stopped in front of the building. The car halted across the street, idling briefly, then drove away. Relief washed over me in waves, though the fear lingered, crawling along my spine like icy fingers. I ran inside, locking the door behind me and double-checking the deadbolt. Sophie was waiting, alarmed. "What happened?" she asked, panic in her voice. I told her everything, every detail, and she shivered. "We need to call the police," she said. I nodded numbly, my stomach in knots. Later that night, curled under my blanket, I tried to calm down. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Sorry about tonight, I can just come by your place instead." "What's your apartment number again?" My blood ran cold. I had never shared that information with him. My fingers shook as I dropped the phone, heart hammering in my chest. Almost on cue, I heard a faint rattle. Someone was trying to push open the window. I screamed and Sophie came running. Together, we yelled for help. Our downstairs neighbor, an ex-Marine, appeared quickly, flashlight in hand. By the time he reached the window, the figure was gone. The police arrived later, taking statements and inspecting the scene. The number Ryan had used was linked to a burner phone. The Tinder profile was gone within hours. They couldn't confirm whether Ryan and the older man were the same person or if they were working together, but the intent was clear. Someone had been tracking me. In the weeks following, I became hyper-aware of everything around me. Curtains remained closed, even in daylight. Every noise, the creak of the floor, a rattling vent, footsteps outside made me jump. I deleted all dating apps, disconnected from online platforms, and stopped responding to unknown numbers. I was careful, cautious, and paranoid, but justified. Someone had intentionally targeted me, studied my habits, and orchestrated a scenario that could have ended far worse. Sophie became my anchor, checking in constantly, asking me to text her when I left work or returned from the grocery store. Friends offered advice, but nothing fully reassured me. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Every dark corner, every shadow felt alive watching me. I became defensive. Doors locked, windows reinforced, motion sensors installed. The sense of vulnerability was exhausting, and I realized the psychological damage was almost worse than any physical threat. The scariest part wasn't just the attempted intrusion. It was the precision, the plan, the timing, the manipulation. Whoever had done this didn't just stumble into the situation. They had crafted it step by step. I had been lured, observed, and nearly followed home. It was calculated, intentional, and terrifying. Months went by, and slowly life returned to some semblance of normalcy. I left my apartment cautiously, began to rebuild my confidence, and learned to navigate public spaces with heightened awareness. The idea of dating again seemed impossible, a threat I wasn't ready to face. Every new message or unknown number set off alarms in my head. Even now, years later, the phone buzzing in the middle of the night makes me flinch. I kept journals recording the events, my emotions, and the subtle patterns I had noticed. Writing helped me process transforming fear into understanding. I realized how easy it is to be targeted and how important it is to trust your instincts over the reassuring words of strangers. The internet can be a double-edged sword. It connects you to people, but can also expose you to danger in ways we rarely anticipate. Over time, I rebuilt a sense of safety, though it was fragile. I stopped blaming myself for trusting Ryan or anyone, but I learned vigilance is essential. I invested in security, stayed alert, and prioritized personal safety above convenience or politeness. The experience left scars, both physical and emotional, but it also taught resilience. The lesson wasn't just about stranger danger. It was about trusting your gut, recognizing subtle red flags, and respecting your own boundaries. The night of terror was a harsh reminder that charm can mask danger, and that sometimes even casual online interactions carry real-world consequences. I carry that knowledge now quietly as armor, never letting my guard down completely, but also refusing to let fear dictate my life entirely. Safety is not just physical, it's psychological. Trust your instincts. Recognize manipulation early and never underestimate the danger of deception. Protect your space. Set firm boundaries and understand that being cautious is not paranoia, it's self-respect. Courage is continuing to live fully while remaining aware of the risks around you. I met Liam during my sophomore year at Boston University in a sociology class that neither of us particularly loved. I remember it vividly because I had stayed up all night preparing a paper only to have my laptop crash hours before it was due. I sat in the library panicked, flipping through my notes when Liam appeared beside me, backpack slung casually over his shoulder. "You look like you could use a hand," he said, his voice calm, the kind of calm that made you believe everything would be okay. He stayed with me for hours, helping me type up the paper, explaining concepts I had overlooked, and even lending me his laptop when mine refused to cooperate. He didn't complain when I fumbled through his explanations, and I found myself laughing at his dry jokes, even while my heart raced with gratitude. From that day on, Liam became a constant in my life. He was the one who remembered my coffee order without asking, who stayed up late when I needed someone to talk to, who lent me a jacket when I forgot mine on a windy October afternoon. Everyone teased me relentlessly. "He's obviously in love with you," my friends would whisper, nudging me as he passed by, but I never thought of him that way. He was safe, dependable, and steady. The kind of person you could lean on when life felt heavy, but my heart always craved excitement. I flirted with other boys, sought the thrill of new relationships, and dismissed Liam's subtle hints with a gentle, "You're the sweetest, Liam." I didn't see the storm brewing in his heart. I didn't notice the way he would glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking, the quiet sigh when I mentioned another crush, or the subtle disappointment when I disappeared into someone else's arms. Liam's love was patient, silent, and enduring, and I took it for granted, assuming it would always be there. I never realized that love could hurt so quietly, so invisibly, until much later. Through the years, Liam became my safety net. When my boyfriends broke my heart, he was there to catch the pieces. When I needed someone to drive me home at midnight, he showed up without hesitation. When I couldn't afford groceries, he quietly filled my fridge, refusing anything in return. His presence was a constant reassurance, a soft background in the soundtrack of my chaotic college life. I remember one evening in junior year, curled up on my dorm floor, crying over a failed exam. Liam sat beside me with a cup of hot chocolate, his hand brushing my hair from my face. "You're stronger than you think," he said gently, "and you don't have to face this alone." I smiled through my tears, leaning on him, oblivious to the weight of his heart that beat only for me. I never stopped to consider the years of patience, the sacrifices, the quiet longing that had gone unnoticed. Liam's devotion was an unspoken contract, one that I had no intention of signing. I loved him in a way, but not the way he loved me. I couldn't give him the thrill, the passion, the romantic heartbeat that he had invested entirely in me. I only knew how to rely on him, absorb his love, and move on with my life. Then Derek came along. He was everything I thought I wanted, charming, adventurous, full of energy and charm. He whisked me off my feet with grand gestures, compliments that made my heart race, and the kind of romance I'd been searching for. I knew Liam would be hurt. He always knew. But I didn't anticipate the depth of the ache that his silence brought me when I broke the news of my engagement. The wedding day was surreal. As I walked down the aisle, Derek's eyes lit with excitement and love, but my gaze kept flickering toward the back row toward Liam. He stood quietly, blending into the crowd, his posture straight, but his eyes heavy with a story that only he knew. In that split second when our eyes met, I saw the years of devotion, heartbreak, and unreturned affection reflected back at me. It was like staring at a mirror of my own negligence. At the reception, Liam maintained his composure flawlessly. He smiled for the photos, clinked glasses with Derek, even gave a brief toast to Hannah, who deserves all the happiness in the world. The crowd cheered and I smiled back, pretending everything was ordinary. My bridesmaids whispered, "He's such a good friend." But the words felt hollow. I had seen the quiet tragedy in his eyes, the silent surrender of a love that had been given endlessly and without condition. Later, when the music slowed and the guests began to leave, I noticed Liam slip away alone. His presence lingered even after he left, a quiet shadow of everything I had taken for granted. On the floor near the exit, I spotted the tie I had given him for his birthday months ago, left behind in his haste or perhaps as a quiet message. The symbolism didn't escape me. He had given everything and walked away with almost nothing. In the years that followed, I occasionally received a text from Liam, usually on my birthday or a holiday. Each one carried a weight, a quiet reminder of the chapter of his life that had been devoted to me, the love he had never stopped feeling. I read them, smiled politely, and put my phone down, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. I tried to reconcile my feelings, but some truths cannot be untangled. The real horror wasn't betrayal or deceit. It was understanding that someone had loved me fully without expectation, and that love had been absorbed without return. I realized that in seeking excitement, charm, and passion, I had overlooked the most steady, enduring presence in my life. Liam had been the constant in my story, and I had treated him as optional. Over time, I grew more reflective. I learned to appreciate acts of kindness, patience, and quiet devotion, recognizing how rare such love is. I also recognized the responsibility that comes with receiving love. You cannot take it for granted. Every gesture, every sacrifice carries weight, and ignoring it leaves scars that are invisible but lasting. Now, whenever I think of Liam, it's with a mixture of admiration and regret. He became a model for what love can be: patient, giving, enduring. He didn't yell, didn't demand, didn't coerce. He simply loved, and that love endured quietly even when it was unreciprocated. I have since built a life with Derek, and that choice brought me joy and adventure, but it also brought perspective. I carry the lesson of Liam with me, that love is not just excitement or romance, it's devotion, patience, and care. I strive to honor that in my own relationships, to never take someone's kindness for granted, and to recognize when someone is giving their all. The truest form of love is quiet, patient, and enduring. It cannot be measured by passion alone, nor should it be taken for granted. When someone gives themselves to you fully, reciprocate with awareness, respect, and gratitude. Neglecting such love may bring temporary thrill, but it leaves lasting emptiness for both giver and receiver. Recognize and honor devotion before it becomes a memory you wish you could change. I never thought I'd go back to online dating after years of failed relationships, heartbreak, and disappointment. I had sworn off it entirely. But in March 2022, feeling both lonely and hopeful, I downloaded Match.com one last time. I told myself this was it. No games, no casual flings, just honesty and maybe, if luck allowed, something real. I created my profile meticulously, choosing photos that were genuine, highlighting my work as a graphic designer in San Diego and writing a bio that was witty but careful. Coffee addict, dog lover, occasional hiker, looking for someone who respects boundaries and shares laughter. That's when Nathan messaged me. His profile was filled with scenic hiking trails, smiling selfies with dogs, and clever captions that made me chuckle. Started messaging cautiously, small talk at first, questions about favorite movies, weekend hobbies. Gradually, our conversations became longer, more personal. He asked about my life, my work, my dreams. He was polite, funny, and persistent, but never pushy. Over the course of several weeks, I felt myself lowering my guard. We finally arranged to meet. I chose a trendy pub near the Gaslamp Quarter, a busy, well-lit space where I could feel safe. When Nathan walked in, my stomach sank. He looked nothing like his pictures, older, heavier, eyes sharp and calculating. I hesitated, debating whether to leave, but told myself I was being judgmental. I could sit through one drink and leave. The first few minutes were bearable. We exchanged polite greetings and small talk, but as the night dragged on, Nathan's behavior changed. He leaned too close, spoke with an intensity that made me nervous, and asked invasive questions about past relationships. When I declined his offer for another drink, he insisted on walking me to my car. Outside, the unease escalated. He tried to kiss me despite my repeated refusals. My pulse spiked, adrenaline rushing, and I shoved him away. I locked myself in my car and drove off, hands trembling, heart racing. I thought it would end there, a bad date, a story to laugh about later. But a few days later, a small bouquet appeared at my doorstep. No note, just flowers. Then a box of chocolates, then a handwritten letter. "You don't have to be scared, we're perfect together, you'll see." I froze. I had never given Nathan my home address. The gifts didn't stop. Stuffed animals, jewelry, a framed photo of a sunset with "for" scribbled on the back. Each package made my stomach twist. At night, I heard footsteps near my apartment window. I would jump, heart racing, peer into the darkness, and see nothing. One morning, I found a single rose taped to my car door. Panic set in. I called my older brother, Evan. Within hours, he was at my apartment helping me install new locks, setting up security cameras, and staying overnight for the first week. The footage later showed a shadowy figure near the doorway at 2:00 a.m. moving deliberately, lingering as if waiting. but the video never captured a clear image, just enough to confirm my worst fears. Someone was watching me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coincidence, a neighbor pranking me, but deep down I knew better. Nathan had fixated on me and he wasn't going to stop unless I forced the boundary. My friends advised calling the police, but without concrete evidence there wasn't much they could do. I felt trapped, vulnerable, constantly alert. One night another package arrived, a necklace engraved with "Forever Mine." I snapped. I couldn't live in fear anymore. I photographed my brother's handgun, placed it on the kitchen counter with meticulous framing, and sent it in an envelope to the P.O. box Nathan had used. Inside I included a note: "Try me again and this is what you'll find waiting." It was bold, risky, but I refused to be a victim. The next day the gift stopped. Silence fell. It was a strange, heavy relief, a reminder that confrontation sometimes works in unexpected ways. Months passed and I slowly reclaimed a sense of safety. The fear never fully disappeared, but it dulled with time. Even after the immediate threat subsided, I couldn't shake the psychological residue. Every text from an unknown number made me flinch. I checked locks obsessively, walked with awareness, and remained hypervigilant about my surroundings. I deleted all dating apps permanently, afraid of unknowable threats lurking in seemingly harmless profiles. The experience reshaped my perception of online interactions. Charm, wit, and shared interests were no guarantee of safety. I spent long nights reflecting on the moments leading up to the obsession. Nathan's persistence had seemed flattering at first, almost romantic, but the escalation from polite messages to invasive behavior, gifts, and surveillance was a calculated pattern. I realized the danger had been masked in familiarity, presented as care, and only revealed as threatening when my boundaries were clear. Sophie, my roommate at the time, reminded me constantly, "People like him don't change, they only escalate. You did the right thing by standing up for yourself." Her words echoed in my mind as I adjusted to life with heightened awareness, knowing I had reclaimed my autonomy, but also carrying the lesson that vigilance isn't optional. Months turned into a year and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. I resumed work, engaged socially but cautiously, and rebuilt a personal sense of safety. I realized I had to create boundaries so impermeable that no charm or persistence could penetrate them. Every interaction, every relationship afterward was filtered through the lens of experience but not fear. I refused to allow past terror to dictate my life entirely. I learned the importance of practical defenses, security cameras, reinforced locks, sharing locations with trusted friends or family. I also recognized emotional resilience as equally crucial. I had to acknowledge fear without letting it dominate my decisions. I had survived, and that survival carried a lesson I couldn't ignore. Years later, now married to Darren, life felt stable and joyful, but the past never truly leaves you. One evening, walking into a restaurant for a dinner party, I froze. Across the room, sitting at a corner table, was Nathan, older, bolder, laughing with a woman who could have been me years ago. My blood ran cold. He didn't see me. But in that moment, I realized he had moved on. Obsession redirected, hunting for someone new. I excused myself to the restroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror, hands trembling. I whispered, "He's not my problem anymore." But the image of the woman smiling across from him stayed in my mind, and I shivered, realizing the danger wasn't always gone. It simply shifts to someone else less aware, less prepared. Even now, I carry the lessons of those months with me. Vigilance, courage, and the right to defend your personal space. I learned to trust instincts over appearances, to act decisively when boundaries are crossed, and to never underestimate the consequences of seemingly small decisions like giving out your address or trusting someone too quickly. Boundaries are not optional, they are essential. Safety is both physical and psychological, and trust must be earned, not assumed. Awareness, vigilance, and assertiveness are acts of self-respect, not paranoia. Danger often hides behind charm and familiarity, and protecting oneself is an act of courage, not fear. Recognize threats early, act decisively, and never allow another's obsession to define your life. I've always believed in second chances, though my track record would argue otherwise. My 20s were a blur of airports, rent checks, and freelance gigs that barely paid for gas. Every relationship I had seemed to end in some kind of betrayal. Rebecca, my ex, was the worst. She had siphoned money from my photography savings to feed a gambling habit I didn't even know existed until the bills came due. After that, I swore I'd never trust anyone fully again. Then I met Clara. She was different, calm, creative, the kind of woman who could make a room feel warmer just by being in it. She designed graphics for small companies, worked remotely, and lived in this rustic cabin she had inherited on Maple Lake Road in Vermont. When she first invited me to stay, I thought it sounded almost too perfect. Snow falling outside, wide windows, warm bread in the oven, the kind of quiet life I had only seen in magazines. The first few weeks were everything I wanted. We'd spend evenings cooking soup together, laughing when one of us accidentally dropped a spoon into the pot. She taught me how to ice skate on the frozen lake, even holding my hands when I slipped. Nights were long and warm with us editing photos or sketching plans for the cabin. I felt alive again. It wasn't just a new relationship. It felt like home, but home has a funny way of revealing cracks. Clara started making late-night phone calls she insisted were client meetings, but I could never hear anything clearly. Sometimes I'd walk past the loft and hear muffled voices stop the moment I appeared. She became protective over her laptop in ways I'd never seen before, snapping at me once for touching it when it had been left on the couch. The intimacy that had drawn me in, the casual kisses, the shared jokes slowly faded. The first warning came subtly, like frost creeping across a window pane. One March evening, I came home early from a short assignment, expecting a quiet cabin. On the porch sat a sleek black leather jacket I didn't recognize. Clara was nowhere in sight, but 2 wine glasses sat on the table. One was half full. "Was that your cousin?" I asked later, trying to keep my tone casual. She laughed lightly and said yes, but Clara had always told me she had no cousins nearby. I forced a smile and told myself I was imagining things, that my past paranoia was leaking into my present, but I couldn't shake the chill creeping along my spine. Some nights, she'd step outside claiming she needed fresh air. And the next morning, I'd notice faint tire tracks in the snow I didn't recognize. Little things started gnawing at me. The cabin, once a symbol of warmth and hope, began to feel alien. I didn't yet know it, but the cracks in Clara's calm exterior were far deeper than I could have imagined. April arrived with a deceptive softness, snow melting into puddles along Maple Lake Road. I had started to accept Clara's strange behavior as quirks rather than warning signs, blaming my anxiety for reading too much into them. That illusion shattered one late evening when I stumbled on the truth. I was editing photos in the living room, coffee in hand, when I noticed Clara's phone left on the coffee table, screen glowing softly. I froze as a message preview flashed. "He's asleep, come now." My stomach lurched. The laughter from upstairs wasn't familiar. It was casual, intimate, and meant to exclude me. My pulse raced as I crept toward the bedroom door. Through the half-open door, I saw Clara lying in bed with Ethan Blake, the local contractor who occasionally fixed things in the cabin. They didn't notice me at first, and when they did, it wasn't fear or guilt in her eyes. It was casual amusement, as though I had walked into someone else's ordinary night. I couldn't move. Every memory we had shared, the late-night edits, the hot soups, the frozen lake, turned into a cruel joke. Ethan laughed softly. Clara's eyes sparkled with the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any slap or shout. I realized then that the home I thought I had found with her was nothing but a mask. I didn't confront them that night. I couldn't. I just retreated to the couch and stayed there, half frozen, half burning with rage. Over the next weeks, I had to coexist with them in that cabin. Snow blocked the roads, leaving me trapped, and Clara didn't hide it anymore. Ethan's truck would appear in the driveway, and Clara's smiles remained unaffected. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me I wasn't welcome in the space I had once called sanctuary. I started noticing patterns, footsteps when no one was around, small objects displaced. The air felt heavier, charged with an invisible tension. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, but sleep became fitful and I avoided being alone in any room. Even the lake, once peaceful, now felt like a mirror reflecting deceit back at me. Living with betrayal isn't about dramatic confrontations. It's about the silent terror of knowing someone can erase your life around you while you pretend to function. I had dreamed of proposing here, of building a future in that cabin, and now I was counting the days until I could escape. But for the moment I was stuck, forced to witness a home transformed into a stage for lies. By mid-April I had developed routines just to survive. I kept a careful log of when Clara left the house, when Ethan showed up, and how long they spent together. Every trip to the kitchen or bathroom was calculated. I ate cold soup in silence, avoided eye contact, and slept in layers of clothing just in case I needed to move quickly. One evening, I decided to confront her indirectly. "Clara," I said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, "I can see Ethan's truck in the driveway more than you see me. What exactly is going on here?" She tilted her head, laughing lightly. "I don't know what you mean." "Are you jealous, Daniel?" "Jealous?" I snapped, feeling my chest tight. "Jealous doesn't even cover it. This is our home. I thought it was safe. I thought we were building something together." Clara's face softened for a moment, then hardened again. "Safe, you knew that, safe." She said, "Darling, life isn't that night." I lay awake on the couch listening to them in the bedroom, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I realized that love could be used as a weapon. Clara had carefully curated this life to appear perfect, to draw me in and then slowly dismantle the trust I had brought with me. Every act of affection had been a lie, every smile a distraction. The snow finally began to melt, and with it my options expanded. I started planning my exit meticulously. Each day I packed a little, hid my essentials, and made mental notes of the roads when they were clear. I knew leaving too early could provoke a confrontation I wasn't ready to face. On the last weekend of April, I watched the lake shimmer in the morning sun and realized the irony. The same place I had felt closest to her now reflected nothing but emptiness. I didn't hate Clara, not yet, but I feared what living there had done to me. My sense of safety, of trust, of home had all been eroded by her deliberate actions. When May came, I finally executed my escape. I packed my remaining belongings into the car while Clara was out, ignoring the pangs of guilt that tried to creep in. I didn't stop to say goodbye. Ethan's truck was gone, too. I drove down Maple Lake Road with the windows down, letting the spring air hit my face, and felt a strange combination of relief and grief. The days after leaving were a blur. I found a short-term rental in town and started reconnecting with work that didn't involve constant reminders of betrayal. I allowed myself to breathe again, though some nights the dreams came back. The images of the cabin, the laughter, the weight of their indifference. I realized slowly that the worst part wasn't the infidelity. It wasn't even the lies. It was how normal everything had seemed until the moment I discovered the truth. That normally had made the betrayal far more profound, eroding the foundation of trust I had carried with me since childhood. Friends asked why I hadn't confronted Clara immediately. I didn't have an answer. Rage and fear weren't always loud. Sometimes they were quiet, simmering in the background, demanding patience until action became possible. Leaving wasn't just about escape, it was about reclaiming myself. Weeks turned into months, and I began rebuilding my life. Photography became my therapy. Late nights editing shots of empty streets and sunlit forests reminded me of the beauty that still existed outside of human deceit. I reconnected with family, friends, and even started cautiously dating again, though with a different mindset. I never returned to Maple Lake Road. The cabin remained, snow melting and returning with seasons, a symbol of what could look perfect on the outside, but harbor rot within. Clara's betrayal taught me a lesson I would carry forever. Trust is fragile, and love, no matter how beautiful, is not a guarantee of safety. Now, whenever I enter a room, I notice small details. The shadows on the floor, the creak of wood, the quiet absence of honesty. It's not paranoia, it's vigilance born from experience. I learned that sometimes people can hide darkness behind warmth, and sometimes the ones we invite into our lives can quietly corrode them from within. But I also learned resilience. I survived. I moved on. And I found my strength. Maple Lake was just a chapter, not the story of my life. True love cannot thrive where trust is absent, and no amount of charm or warmth can replace honesty. The heart may be wounded, but resilience and self-awareness are the only way to reclaim it. I had never been a fan of online dating. Growing up in Brighton, my parents' divorce had left permanent cracks in my perception of trust, especially online. My father's affair had been discovered through secret messages, a digital trail that had torn our family apart. I swore I'd never let technology betray me the way it had betrayed my mother. For years, I avoided apps, swiping, and anything that even remotely felt like an invitation to exposure. Yet here I was, 26 years old, sitting on my small couch in my flat on Marine Parade, scrolling through an app called True Match. My roommate Maya had nagged me into it for weeks, insisting I'd meet someone worth my time. I wasn't convinced. I created my profile carefully, leaving out my last name, workplace, and location tags. My bio reads simply, teacher, coffee addict, loves old bookstores. I told myself these precautions were enough. I wasn't going to let myself get swept away by digital charm. Then I matched with Adrian Walsh. From the start, he was different. No cheesy pickup lines, no emojis stacked like a tower of desperation. He asked questions, smart questions about history, books, and childhood memories. I remember feeling a flicker of relief when I read his first few messages. Someone actually cared about the person, not just the photo. We started exchanging voice notes. His tone was calm, even soothing, like he could read the quiet anxiety buried in me and speak to it without triggering it. After a week of cautious conversation, he asked for my number. My heart raced at the request, but there was something in his patience that made me trust him just a little. We texted for the first time outside the app. Everything still felt measured, comfortable. I began to feel lighter than I had in years. I allowed myself tiny glimpses of normally, laughing at his jokes, telling him about the odd students in my class, the tiny victories of the day. It all started to shift when he asked for my Instagram. I froze. I had deliberately kept my account private, sharing only photos for family and close friends. I'm not comfortable with that yet, I typed carefully, trying to set a boundary without appearing rude. The reply came almost instantly. Oh, don't worry, I've already found you. My stomach dropped. I didn't understand at first. Adrian's messages started to include details only someone who had spent time observing me could know. He referenced a photo of me at Brighton Pier, a snap with blurred-out student artwork in the background, even the cafe where Maya and I grabbed coffee every Friday. I hadn't shared any of this with him. My blood ran cold as the realization set in. He had pieced together my life from online breadcrumbs, perhaps using reverse image searches, mapping every predictable detail. The tone of his messages shifted. Where curiosity had once been comforting, insistence took its place. I saw you ordering your usual cappuccino. Didn't realize you'd be here today. At first, I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he had friends who passed through my favorite places. But the late-night messages made that impossible to believe. You should really draw your curtains, Sophie. Anyone could be watching. Fear settled in like a permanent weight. I confided in Maya immediately. I think he's watching me, I whispered over tea. One evening. She was horrified, urging me to go to the police. You need evidence, Sophie, she said. Screenshots, timestamps, this is serious, but I felt powerless. What crime had technically been committed? He hadn't touched me. He had only invaded my life in ways that left no bruises, only creeping terror. Things escalated when my principal called me. Someone had emailed the school pretending to be me requesting photographs of students for a class project. The office refused, thankfully, but I felt the walls closing in. Adrian had crossed the line from digital obsession to professional harassment. The paranoia I had tried to keep at bay became unavoidable. Every narrow lane in Brighton looked threatening. Every late-night car stop filled me with dread. I began altering routines, leaving the house at different times, avoiding the coffee shop on Fridays, checking windows and doors obsessively. I deleted my dating profile, blocked his number, even changed my phone, but nothing erased the knowing sense that he was always one step ahead. His digital footprint was invisible yet omnipresent. Sleep became impossible. I would wake up at 3:00 a.m. convinced I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. The smallest noise, a creak of a floorboard, a car engine revving down the street, sent my pulse racing. Even when I convinced myself it was harmless, my mind replayed scenarios of Adrian watching from somewhere, always just out of reach. I tried to return to normally. Teaching became a refuge, but even in the classroom I couldn't shake it. I noticed strangers lingering too long near my school, always looking in a certain direction, almost as if they knew I would be there. Every message notification made my heart leap, expecting it to be him. Maya insisted I report everything to the police, but with each incident my frustration grew. Without a clear crime to point to, law enforcement couldn't act decisively. I remember one evening in particular. I had returned home after grading papers late at night, walking down a narrow lane behind the bookstore I loved. My coat hood pulled low, heart pounding when a black car stopped nearby. I froze. The driver's side window rolled down, empty, just a trick of the shadows, my imagination. I don't know, by the time I reached my flat, I was shaking, hands trembling on the keys. The realization was unbearable. Adrian's obsession had infiltrated my entire life. Every digital presence, every predictable habit, every photo I thought private, it had become a road map for him. I couldn't trust the digital world, and more painfully, I couldn't trust my own judgment. I took drastic measures. I deleted all social media accounts, deactivated my email, and even changed my phone number again. I moved a few blocks from my original flat, hoping the change in scenery would help, but the sense of being observed lingered. I installed motion sensors, changed locks, and never went out at night alone. Even mundane errands became exercises in paranoia. Maya tried to console me. You can't let him win. Sophie, you're stronger than this, but strength didn't erase fear. It didn't erase the feeling that someone had invaded your life without ever physically touching you. Adrian's digital footprint, though invisible, had rewritten my reality. I realized that safety wasn't just about locks or police reports. It was about controlling exposure, reclaiming boundaries I had once taken for granted. Every precaution I implemented was a barrier against not just him, but against the fragile illusion of normal life that had been shattered. Months passed. I began to breathe easier, though the scars remained. I returned to teaching with caution, slowly letting colleagues into my trust. I allowed myself to visit the bookstore again, taking different streets home, watching my surroundings. I dated cautiously, always mindful of how digital information could be manipulated. The hardest lesson was accepting that the danger had been subtle. It wasn't the sudden, obvious threat that had traumatized me. It was the slow erosion of trust and security. The way someone had pieced together my life with patience and obsession. I had invited him into my life in a small, seemingly harmless way, and that invitation had cost me peace of mind. I learned to rebuild cautiously. I restored trust in myself, in boundaries, and in the small joys of ordinary life. Digital spaces, once a source of connection, were now places where I moved carefully, deliberately. I had survived the invisible invasion, but the experience had left an indelible mark on the way I lived and loved. The scariest dangers often come silently through trust misused and boundaries ignored. Protecting your privacy and instincts is as important as protecting your heart, and vigilance is a form of self-respect in a world where technology can be a weapon. I just turned 23 when I moved out of my parents' house, taking my first real steps into independence. Denver in November has a way of feeling both alive and empty at the same time. The streets sparkled with holiday lights, but my tiny apartment on Willow Street was quiet, too quiet. My mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer earlier that year, and my savings were already stretched thin covering her treatment. Between working full days at the bookstore and evening shifts delivering food, my life felt like a series of checklists with barely any space for me. Loneliness had become routine. I came home to an empty apartment and flicked through streaming apps, read books, or stared out at the snow-covered street below. I thought maybe, just maybe, having someone to talk to would make things less suffocating. That's why, against every instinct I had, I downloaded Hinge. I set strict rules: no revealing my last name, no workplace details, no exact addresses. My bio was simple: nothing personal, adventurous at heart, loves books, jazz, and strong coffee. I wanted to test the waters without giving anyone a map to my life, but the moment Kate Miller appeared on my screen, something inside me hesitated. Her profile photos were polished yet approachable. One of her smiling in a floral dress, another sitting by a campfire with a guitar. Her bio said she was adventurous, loves jazz, good wine, and hiking. She seemed fun, a spark in the monotony of my world. We matched, and our conversation began cautiously. Her texts were sharp, witty, but direct. She didn't laugh at my jokes. She responded with precise sentences that somehow felt like she was analyzing me. In the lonely haze of my life, it was enough. I found myself clinging to the attention, interpreting bluntness as honesty. A week later, she insisted we meet. Why waste time? Life's short, she wrote. I hesitated. The pandemic was still ongoing, and meeting strangers felt risky, but she was persistent, and I was lonely enough to agree. Dinner was set at a small restaurant on Willow Street, a quiet section of town with dim lights and brick buildings. I remember checking my reflection multiple times before leaving. Hair brushed, jacket clean, voice practiced. Even walking to the restaurant, unease pricked at me. Her messages leading up to the date had been unusually intense. You're on your way, right? You wouldn't flake. You're not like the others, are you? Each buzz of my phone made my stomach tighten. I tried to convince myself she was just nervous. When I saw her waiting outside the restaurant, reality hit. She looked older than her photos. Her hair was tied back messily, and she wore an oversized jacket that smelled faintly of cigarettes. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're taller than I thought, she said flatly, walking past me without hesitation. I followed, unsure whether to be offended or amused. At the table, things only got worse. She was precise, commanding, and intensely focused on me. Her questions felt invasive. Do you live alone? Top floor or ground floor? Do you lock your windows? How many locks on your door? My skin crawled. I tried to redirect the conversation to books, music, and ordinary life, but nothing diverted her attention. Her gaze never wavered, always returning to me as if trying to read every secret I had. I laughed nervously. That's oddly specific, I said. She leaned closer, whispering. You can tell me I'm not dangerous. Dangerous, that word rang in my mind, but I laughed it off to keep my composure. Dinner ended awkwardly. I paid, eager to leave, expecting a polite goodbye, but she simply stood, muttered, "See you later," and walked to her beat-up silver sedan. Relief washed over me. Surely I'd never hear from her again. I was wrong. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, finally breathing in the quiet. My chest still thumped from the intensity of the dinner, but I tried to tell myself it had been a one-off. I locked the door behind me and started unpacking my bag when my phone buzzed. You didn't even invite me in. Rude, I froze. My heart raced as I dropped my bag on the floor. I hadn't given her an inch of access to my apartment. How could she know I had arrived? I ignored it, trying to rationalize the situation. Perhaps it was a friend of a friend, a coincidence. But minutes later, another message arrived. Nice curtains. Yellow doesn't suit you. The blood drained from my face. My living room curtains were indeed yellow. She could see inside. The street light outside cast just enough illumination for someone to peer in. Panic coursed through me. I killed the lights, crouched by the kitchen counter, and dialed 911 with trembling hands. The operator instructed me to stay hidden until officers arrived. I peered out from the corner of the counter. A figure emerged from the shadows, her face pressed against the glass. A grotesque wide smile plastered across her face. She tapped lightly on the window, sing-songing, "I see you." Then the sound of breaking glass. She had thrown a rock. I screamed and ducked, glass scattering across the floor. My apartment, my sanctuary, had been violated. I didn't dare move until I heard the sirens. Police arrived within minutes, dragging her away while she screamed my name as if we had been lovers for years. The aftermath was a blur. I learned she had no stable address and a history of harassment reports, none of which had stuck legally. I filed for a restraining order, but every creak, every flicker of a street lamp, every distant footstep triggered the same panic. The apartment felt small, suffocating, every corner a potential hiding place. I changed the curtains, installed extra locks, and began sleeping with my phone near my pillow, fully charged. Every door, every window, every shadow felt like a potential threat. The city I once loved had become a cage, and I was trapped inside my own fear. Life didn't return to normal after that night. Even months later, the feeling of being watched persisted. I avoided going out at night whenever possible, choosing early mornings for errands instead. The bookstore became both my sanctuary and my prison, safe during daylight, but each time I left, I felt eyes tracking me. Therapy helped, but it couldn't erase the image of her smile pressed against my window. Friends tried to reassure me. "It's over, Kate's gone," they said, but my mind replayed the scene endlessly. The tapping, the messages, the way she had known exactly where I was and what I was doing. The invasion had been intimate, precise, personal. Even casual social media seemed risky now. I deactivated accounts, deleted photos, and avoided posting anything public. Every interaction became measured, every step deliberate. The world I had trusted to be safe felt unreliable, fragile, and full of hidden threats. I realized the danger wasn't physical alone, it was psychological. It was in the anticipation, the waiting, the knowledge that someone had crossed boundaries in ways I hadn't anticipated. Kate had weaponized curiosity, charm, and persistence. The fear wasn't just in the moment. It lingered, shaping how I moved, how I thought, how I trusted. I became hyper-aware of everything. The pattern of footsteps outside my apartment, the flicker of lights, the hum of traffic that might mask a figure lurking. I installed motion sensors, new locks, and reinforced blinds. Every night I double-checked doors and windows. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams were haunted by her image, always at the edge of vision, always silent, always watching. I avoided dating entirely. Every message, every request to meet someone new triggered anxiety. I told myself it wasn't just fear, it was learned caution. My autonomy, my privacy, my safety had been compromised, and the lessons were unforgiving. I had to be vigilant, not paranoid. There was a difference. Paranoia imagined threats, vigilance recognized them. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, giving me strategies to reclaim my life without succumbing to immobilizing fear. I practiced leaving the apartment at odd times, checking the street before going out, and focusing on self-care rituals. I refused to let her break me completely, but part of me remained suspended in that night. The sound of glass shattering, the soft tap at the window, the messages that arrived with eerie precision. Months stretched into a year, and while the terror never fully disappeared, I learned to reclaim my life slowly. I started venturing out in the evenings, visiting cafes, walking streets I hadn't dared to explore before. I reconnected with friends, invested in hobbies, and forced myself to remember that not everyone had malicious intent. The lessons were hard. I understood that danger isn't always obvious. People can present themselves as charming, normal, even caring, while harboring intentions that are invasive and predatory. Boundaries once crossed leave lasting impressions. Trust must be earned, but so must freedom from fear. I learned to rebuild my world cautiously. My apartment, once a place of terror, became a space where I could reclaim control. Motion sensors, reinforced blinds, and careful routines became symbols not of fear, but of resilience. Every day I reminded myself vigilance isn't weakness, it's self-respect. Over time I allowed myself to hope again, not for strangers or blind trust, but for the possibility of a world where my autonomy, my privacy, and my peace mattered. Kate's intrusion had been real, terrifying, and personal. But surviving it taught me the most crucial lesson. No matter how invisible the danger, awareness and preparation are the strongest shields we can have. True safety comes from respecting and protecting your boundaries. Danger often arrives subtly, cloaked in charm or persistence, and only by trusting your instincts can you safeguard your life, mind, and peace. I was 24 when my life started to feel like it belonged to someone else. My father had died suddenly the year before, leaving me with a sense of emptiness I didn't know how to fill. Routine became my lifeline. Every morning I walked the same route to the coffee shop on 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle, where I had worked as a barista for 3 years. I knew the regulars' orders by heart. From the student who wanted 3 shots in her latte to the office guy who always requested oat milk with cinnamon on top, the familiarity was comforting. It kept the grief manageable. I had a guilty little escape outside of work, TikTok. At first, it was just silly videos. Latte art shaped like hearts, clips of the espresso machine steaming milk, or short shots of rainy Seattle streets. No one really noticed. My videos got maybe a dozen views at most. Then one Friday, a customer asked for the strangest drink he could think of, and I filmed it on a whim. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Thousands of views, comments, shares, followers. Overnight, my small, quiet life exploded into something I didn't fully understand. Suddenly, I had a fan base. People recognized me on the street. "Hey, you're the coffee girl from TikTok." They wanted more content. I felt like I'd found something that was mine, something exciting beyond grief and monotony. I started posting daily behind-the-scenes shots of the cafe, tutorials, funny interactions with customers. Followers kept growing, and with each notification I felt validation I hadn't realized I was craving. But then the shadows appeared. At first the comments were harmless, flirtatious, maybe a little annoying but not dangerous. Wish you worked at my coffee shop or you make my mornings brighter. Then one account, Carla TRL, started leaving detailed messages. You're prettier without makeup. Don't wear the black apron tomorrow. Wear green. I laughed it off. It was creepy, but maybe it was a coincidence. People could guess what I wore at work. Then came the line that froze me. Careful walking home alone after your shift. My heart jumped. My shifts ended at 10 p.m. That meant someone was watching me in real life. The next night, Marcus, my coworker, stayed late with me while I closed. Do you see anyone outside? I whispered. He glanced out the window, squinting. Just some guy leaning against the lamppost. I laughed nervously, but my chest tightened. Someone was following me, stalking me because of my videos. The realization was terrifying. Back in my tiny apartment, the fear didn't leave. During a live stream, I read comments aloud, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Then one popped up from Carla TRL. Your bedroom light flickers too much. Change the bulb. My blood ran cold. The lamp beside my bed had indeed been flickering that night. He had been inside my apartment, or at least seen it, through the camera or a window. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking. Marcus tried to reassure me. Some troll, someone exaggerating. Maybe it's just no, I said, gripping the counter. This isn't just online, he's here. It escalated twice. I found my car window smashed after work. Nothing stolen, just broken glass. Once a note tucked under the wiper read, I like the red scarf. Wear it again. I hadn't posted that scarf online. I hadn't told anyone about it. He was following me physically. I went to the police. Someone is stalking me, I explained, showing the notes and videos. They took a report but were hesitant. Unless he directly threatens you, there's little we can do, they said. Their calm dismissal made the fear worse. I felt helpless, like my life had been hijacked. I bought a cheap security camera for my apartment and set it up the first night. My phone buzzed with a notification. Movement detected. I opened the feed. My car outside, a crouched figure, hooded, scratching the paint, grainy, but I could see the face, gaunt, pale, eyes wide, and then a smirk directly at the camera. The police finally acted after the camera footage. Jonas Reed, 32, unemployed, living out of his car, was arrested for stalking, trespassing, and vandalism. They found printouts of my TikTok videos, screenshots of Instagram, and even a handwritten schedule of my work shifts. He had been meticulously planning his harassment. Even after he was gone, the terror lingered. Every night I'd wake convinced someone was in the apartment. Footsteps, shadows, noises that were probably harmless, but my mind interpreted them as danger. I had lost a sense of safety I hadn't realized I'd taken for granted. The cafe felt different too. Familiar faces suddenly felt like potential threats. Any stranger could be someone like Jonas, watching, planning. The joy I had felt in my TikTok content was gone. Sharing my life had made me vulnerable in ways I couldn't control. I became hyper-aware. I double-checked doors, reinforced windows, installed motion sensors. I no longer posted online regularly. My digital life shrank until it was almost non-existent. Every routine became deliberate. I didn't just go to work. I analyzed the street, the lighting, every passerby. Sleep was light and fragmented. Even in daylight, the paranoia lingered. Therapy helped. Talking through the fear, numbing it, dissecting it helped reclaim some control. But the lesson was clear. Digital exposure can become a real-world threat. Jonas hadn't physically harmed me in the beginning, but the mental invasion was just as destructive. He had made my home, my life, even my coffee shop shifts feel unsafe. It took months to feel normal again. I moved apartments, changed routines, and rebuilt my sense of safety slowly. I returned to TikTok eventually, but cautiously, never revealing location, never personal details. Every post was measured. I realized the platform that gave me joy could also endanger me if boundaries weren't protected. I started reclaiming life cautiously. Walks, coffee with friends, evenings at home without constant fear. But I never forgot how easy it was for someone to feel entitled to another's life simply because it was visible online. Fame had taught me a brutal truth. Not everyone respects boundaries. Some people will pursue access until they are physically at your door. Protect your personal space both online and offline. Sharing your life can inspire connection, but some strangers will exploit visibility to cross boundaries. Awareness, preparation, and vigilance are the only shields against those who feel entitled to your privacy. I never expected to feel lonely in Charleston. After my divorce, I thought moving to a new city would be enough. A fresh start at 38, far from the small town where everything reminded me of her. My townhouse on the quiet street near the historic district was half empty when I arrived. Boxes filled the garage, walls were bare, and my mother's antique furniture sat packed away. I wanted simplicity, but I didn't realize how much empty space magnifies your own thoughts. I worked remotely in finance, mostly from home. The work was steady, predictable, and safe. The predictability was comforting, but it also left room for isolation. Weekdays blurred together, weekends were the hardest. That's when I started looking for human connection again, something that didn't involve a screen or spreadsheets. The book club at the local library seemed perfect. It was small, only a dozen people, all warm and polite, discussing poetry and classic novels. That's where I met Sophie Turner. She was younger than me, 27, and had a quiet presence, the kind that makes you feel like she's observing the world, carefully before stepping in. Her soft brown eyes often lingered just a little too long on the pages she read, and when she smiled it seemed almost apologetic, like she worried she shouldn't be smiling at all. We exchanged pleasantries at first, comments on the book of the month, recommendations, favorite passages. Over a few weeks, those conversations grew longer. She laughed at small things, nodded thoughtfully, asked questions that made me think. Eventually, I asked if she'd like to come over for dinner. She agreed casually, almost too casually. I told myself it was normal, that it was just a quiet meal between two people who enjoyed talking. I spent the day preparing roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots, my grandmother's recipe, the one I remembered from Sunday dinners long ago. I polished silverware I hadn't touched since the divorce, poured a bottle of Chardonnay I saved for special occasions, and placed fresh tulips in my mother's antique glass vase. The house smelled like home, or at least the version of home I wanted it to be. Sophie arrived at 7:30 sharp. She carried a small notebook tucked under her arm, wearing a cream sweater that matched her quiet demeanor. She complimented the tulips and the smell of the roast, but she barely touched the food. I offered her wine. She lifted the glass politely but didn't sip. The conversation was light at first. Books, art, small talk, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't place, something off. Her questions started normal enough but quickly became probing. Do you live alone? Does anyone visit often? Do your neighbors check in on you? I laughed awkwardly, deflecting. I wanted to be polite. I wanted to believe the unease was just me being paranoid, but my gut screamed otherwise. By dessert, I was tense. Sophie had excused herself to the bathroom, claiming she needed to check her notes, and I stood in the kitchen listening for the sound of running water. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I debated knocking, but my mind raced with possibilities, all of them worse than reality. When she returned, she said her sister was unwell and that she needed to leave early. Polite, calm, almost too calm. She thanked me, smiled, and left. I exhaled, telling myself it was over. That night, I barely slept. Around midnight, a sound broke the silence, glass shattering. My tulips lay sprawled across the kitchen floor. At first, I thought a draft had knocked over the vase, but then I saw her. Sophie was standing near the knife holder, her hand hovering above the knives. Her eyes were calm, unreadable. I froze, my heart hammering. She pulled one knife halfway out, then placed it back carefully. No words, just a whisper. Your house feels too quiet. Then she left through the back door, disappearing into the dark. I called the police immediately. They arrived, took fingerprints from the knife and the wine glass, and documented everything. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't want a court case, a trial, more confrontation. I changed the locks, installed cameras, and avoided the book club for months. The days after were a blur of anxiety. Every sound made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the wind rattling windows, even my own reflection in the mirror. I replayed her words constantly. Your house feels too quiet. They weren't just words. They were a statement, a warning, a violation. My home, the one place I thought I controlled, felt like it no longer belonged to me. Life became a careful balance. I started locking doors immediately, even during the day. I avoided social events, canceled casual plans. I checked every visitor against the book club roster, hesitant to open my door to anyone. The town I had loved for its quiet charm began to feel like a cage. Friends tried to help. They offered company, reassurance, reminders that the world wasn't full of Sophies. I appreciated it, but fear is a stubborn companion. It doesn't leave just because you want it to. I stopped cooking elaborate meals. I stopped buying flowers. The house felt sterile, quiet, like I had done everything Sophie had hinted at, removed the vulnerability that had invited her in. At night, I double-checked every window, even in rooms I never used. I slept with my phone in hand, always ready to call for help. Every shadow became a potential threat. My imagination turned small noises into narratives, each one involving intrusion, danger, and Sophie smiling at me from a corner I couldn't see. Weeks turned into months. I joined therapy, finally speaking about the incident in detail. I realized that loneliness had made me open doors I should never have opened. The vulnerability I sought, connection, warmth, companionship, was exactly what someone like Sophie exploited. I returned to book clubs eventually, cautiously. I learned to read people differently, noticing the subtle signs of control, obsession, or unpredictability. I became cautious online too, deleting any personal details that might hint at my routines. My life shrank to what I could manage safely. Even with precautions, the psychological toll lingered. My home, once a sanctuary, remained a reminder of what could happen when trust is misplaced. Every creak in the floor, every flicker of light, every note of silence carried memory. Eventually, I reclaimed some normally. I redecorated, bought new furniture, new tulips. I went out with friends without calculating risk every minute. I learned boundaries are not just physical. They are emotional, social, and psychological. Sophie's intrusion taught me that danger doesn't always look like a crime. It can be quiet, calculated, and slow. What I feared most wasn't the knife or the glass, but the fact that someone had entered my life, my space, and left me questioning every instinct I had. Loneliness can make us vulnerable, but vigilance is not paranoia. Protect your home, your mind, and your boundaries. Trust is earned slowly, and not everyone who smiles or shares your interest deserves a place in your life. Silence can be peaceful, but it can also be a warning, reminding you to safeguard what truly belongs to you. I never imagined my life could feel so fragile. I was 34, running a small graphic design studio in downtown Portland, Maine, with my wife Clara and our 10-year-old daughter Emily. From the outside, we looked normal. Family dinners, school drop-offs, a dog that barked at every delivery truck. But the truth was, our household had been slowly unraveling for years. I could feel the tension in the air every evening as I walked through the door, heavy enough to press my shoulders down and make my chest ache. Clara had changed. She worked late, sometimes disappearing into the evenings with excuses about parent-teacher meetings or lesson plans. Her laughter, once warm and easy, became quieter, almost absent, especially when I walked into a room. She carried her phone with her constantly, her thumb scrolling with nervous rhythm, eyes flicking down at messages I couldn't see. I wanted to ignore it, telling myself she was under pressure, that I was overreacting, but the silence between us at night was deafening. She would turn her back to me in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I would lie awake, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, wondering if she was thinking of someone else. Emily, too, was different. My bright, cheerful little girl had become quiet and withdrawn. Where she once tumbled through the living room, pirouetting in ballet slippers and spinning until the lamps shook, she now spent hours in her room, sketching or staring blankly at her ceiling. Occasionally, I would hear her sobbing quietly at night, but when I knocked, she would wipe her tears and say she was fine. I tried talking to Clara about it. "We need to check on her," I said one evening. Clara shrugged, dismissive. "She's just growing up. Kids get moody. Don't read too much into it." Her tone, calm and rehearsed, felt like a door closing in my chest. I began paying closer attention. I noticed how Emily would linger in doorways, glancing at us as if she were measuring something we didn't know. She left little notes in the house, drawings of shadowy figures standing between people, cryptic messages about keeping secrets and fixing things. I chalked it up to imagination at first. Children often create worlds to process things they don't fully understand. But a small, gnawing anxiety settled in my stomach, persistent and growing. The night it all escalated began like any other. I came home late from the studio, tired and ready to collapse, expecting the quiet of the house to be comforting. But when I opened the door, the rain had left Emily's ballet shoes soaked and abandoned on the porch. I felt my stomach drop. Inside, her bedroom was unnervingly neat. The bed was made, the desk arranged, everything in its place, but on the pillow, a folded note. I picked it up with trembling hands. In her childish, careful handwriting were the words, "Don't be scared, I'm trying to stop the bad things, I'll fix it." My heart sank. My little girl, the one who once chased sunlight across the floorboards, had gone out into the world thinking she could protect us, thinking she could control the chaos I didn't even fully understand. I found Clara in the living room, gripping her phone like it was a lifeline. I demanded answers, but she waved me off. "She's being dramatic, kids exaggerate." Her calmness made my stomach twist. Something was wrong, something more than imagination or mood swings. I called the police immediately. By midnight, they had traced Emily using local surveillance cameras. She had left the house alone, walking toward an abandoned construction site near the harbor. The footage was heartbreaking. Tiny legs carrying her through wet streets, clutching her sketchbook like it was armor, her coat wrapped tightly around her. There was determination in her posture, but also vulnerability I couldn't bear to see. We drove through the cold, rain-slicking streets toward the site. The harbor was deserted, littered with rusted beams, broken glass, and construction debris. Officers called out, flashlights cutting through the fog, but Emily was nowhere in sight. My chest tightened with every passing minute. I imagined her trapped, hurt, cold, or worse, thinking she had to handle things that weren't her responsibility. After 2 long, agonizing hours, we found her beneath a collapsed scaffolding. She was pale, eyes wide open, clutching her sketchbook, pages torn and soaked. The drawings depicted shadowy figures standing between a man and a woman, our family, or a distorted version of it. My knees gave way as I held her, shaking, whispering her name. She whimpered, but she was alive. That was all that mattered in that moment. The police pieced together the events. Emily had stumbled upon Clara's affair with Rachel, the nanny we had hired to help. While Clara's schedule grew heavier, Emily must have overheard arguments, witnessed things no child should, and interpreted them through the lens of innocence and responsibility. She believed she could fix the situation herself. Clara had tried to cover it up. She had communicated with Rachel that night, hiding details from the authorities, and obstructed the investigation. When confronted, her face was pale, her composure artificial, almost rehearsed. That night shattered my ability to trust her again. I couldn't, not after Emily nearly paid the price for our mistakes. The weeks that followed were suffocating. Clara was arrested and eventually charged with obstruction. Emily and I stayed with my sister temporarily while the house felt abandoned. Every corner, every detail reminded me of the betrayal. The ballet shoes outside, the note on her pillow, the wet coat she wore that night. My studio became impossible to manage. I couldn't focus. Clients waited for weeks. My designs were blank on the page, my mind replaying the night over and over. Emily retreated further into her drawings. Her art depicted shadows, figures, and faceless people standing between us, showing her understanding of the invisible walls growing between mother and father. We spoke often, gently, about boundaries, responsibility, and trust. She learned quickly that adults sometimes make mistakes too big for children to fix. I reassured her, held her hand, and promised I would always protect her. Life began to rebuild slowly. Clara's presence was gone. The house remained a symbol of absence and betrayal. I bought Emily new ballet shoes, placed them carefully inside her room. We returned to school routines, small dinners, quiet walks. The police completed their investigation and Rachel was dismissed. I learned the weight of secrecy, the cost of lies, and the danger of leaving children to interpret adult choices. Emily's resilience astounded me. Her small, careful hands sketched shadows and light, processing what she couldn't say. We began therapy together. The sessions were slow, painful, and honest. Emily learned that the burden wasn't hers to carry, and I learned that protection isn't just physical, it's emotional too. Months passed and the house became livable again. Emily twirled in the living room, careful not to knock over the lamps. I returned to work, gradually regaining confidence. The memory of that night, the note on the pillow, remained, but it was tempered with perspective. I realized then that the biggest failures often come from adults. Children notice more than we think. They attempt to fix what we cannot control. And when they step into danger because of our mistakes, the damage isn't only physical, it's emotional, shaping their trust and sense of safety. For years, responsibility is not just for ourselves. It extends to those who depend on us. Lies, secrets, and neglect can harm more than we realize. Protect the innocent, communicate openly, and never underestimate the insight of a child. Vulnerability is not weakness, but when entrusted improperly, it can carry consequences that last a lifetime. I never thought I'd be the type of person to watch love slip away like sand through my fingers. At 29, I thought I had it all with Hannah Clark. We had been together since high school. 10 years of shared secrets, late-night drives, and inside jokes that no one else could understand. People around us used to smile, nodding knowingly when we held hands in the hallway or lingered under the gym bleachers after football games. We carried that reputation into college, into our first jobs, into the tiny apartment with the squeaky floorboards where we thought we could build a life. Hannah was different from everyone I'd ever known, bright, creative, and stubborn in all the ways I loved. She worked at the community theater, directing plays, writing scripts, chasing her dreams with a relentless passion. I worked at a marketing agency, trading my evenings for promotions and client meetings, believing that financial security was the way to protect the love we had. At first, it worked. Our worlds overlapped. We'd cook dinner together, walk the city streets hand in hand, and lie awake late at night planning names for our future kids. But life has a way of rearranging priorities without asking permission. Slowly, the cracks appeared. It started with missed dinners. I'd come home hungry, hopping for her warm smile, only to find her curled up under dim light, sketching costumes for a play. I would ask her to watch a show with me, and she'd smile faintly, shaking her head. Our conversation shrank from hours to minutes to awkward silences. I told myself it was stress. She told herself the same. The first time I felt the distance as something more than stress was on a Thursday evening in early spring. I'd spent the day at work, the office buzzing with deadlines, my phone lighting up constantly. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, sketchbook open, pencil tracing lines I didn't understand. She looked up briefly, smiled softly, then returned to her drawings. I tried to start a conversation. "Hey, how was rehearsal?" I asked. She hummed fine and went back to her sketching. The short, clipped answer shouldn't have worried me, but it did. That night I lay awake in our bed, listening to her breathing, the soft scratch of pencil on paper echoing through the apartment. I realized I didn't know her anymore, not fully. We had been building parallel lives, overlapping only by habit and memory. My heart ached, but I told myself it would pass. Love, I thought, could survive distance. It had to. Days became weeks, and the silence grew heavier. Hannah's attention shifted almost imperceptibly. She left her phone face down on the kitchen counter more often, her laughter softer when she received texts, her touch hesitant when I reached for her hand. I tried to confront it gently. "Hannah, are we okay?" I asked one evening, sitting beside her on the couch. She didn't answer right away, tracing a circle on the couch cushion with her finger. Finally, she whispered, "I don't feel the same anymore." I blinked, trying to process it. What do you mean?" I stammered. She looked at me, eyes wide, filled with sadness rather than anger. "I mean, I love you, but it's different. It's not the way it used to be. I've changed. You've changed." Somewhere along the way, it faded. I wanted to scream, to grab her, to shake her, and make her remember every promise we made, every late-night plan, every whispered, "I love you." But she was calm. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't hiding an affair. There was no villain in this story. Just the quiet erosion of something I thought would never break. We sat in silence for a long while, the mountains outside glowing pink and orange in the fading sunset. I sipped my wine, but it tasted bitter. She traced the rim of her glass slowly, her lips pressed tight. "I wanted to tell you sooner," she said finally. "I just didn't know how." I nodded, words failing me. There was no argument, no shouting, just the unbearable weight of finality. The next morning, her toothbrush was gone. The closet was half empty. A note lay on the table, written in her neat handwriting. "Thank you for everything. Please don't hate me." I didn't hate her. I barely recognized the emptiness in my chest as anything other than grief. I walked through the apartment, touching objects that were hers, smelling her perfume faintly lingering in the kitchen. The apartment was alive with absence. For weeks, I moved through the apartment in a daze. The sound of her keys in the door haunted me even when she wasn't coming home. I would hear her laugh echoing from the balcony, even though it had been months since she was gone. I tried to distract myself with work, with friends, with exercise, but the spaces she once occupied seemed to mock me. Friends offered advice. "Time heals everything," they said. "You'll find someone else." But the truth is, you can't replace 10 years of shared memories with a stranger's laughter. I couldn't call it betrayal because there was none. There wasn't even bitterness. The horror lay in the absence of a culprit. No one had wronged me. Love had quietly died. At night, I would sit on the balcony, glass of wine in hand, watching the sun set over the mountains. I traced the edges of memories, first kisses behind the bleachers, long drives with no destination, laughter that used to fill our tiny apartment. I realized that love is fragile, more fragile than we like to admit. It doesn't always end with storms or fights. Sometimes it just disappears. Months passed and the apartment slowly felt less haunted. I painted walls a new color, rearranged furniture, tried to carve out a life that wasn't tethered to her absence. I went on dates, at first awkward and painful, then gradually easier. But every so often, I'd catch myself staring at an empty chair, expecting her to fill it. Every photo, every small trace of our shared life reminded me that the person I loved most had simply grown apart. I learned to forgive, not her because there was nothing to forgive but myself. I hadn't failed in some catastrophic way. I hadn't done anything wrong. Love isn't a possession, it isn't a guarantee, and sometimes, even with the deepest devotion, it can quietly die without warning. By the time I turned 30, I understood something crucial about relationships. Attachment does not equal permanence. The pain of losing someone isn't always the fault of betrayal, deceit, or anger. Often it is the slow, invisible drift of two people growing into different lives. Hannah had left me with no one to blame, but she had also left me with a lesson I carry to this day. I learned to cherish love while it exists, to notice the subtle signs, to communicate before silence grows too heavy. I learned to accept that sometimes the end isn't dramatic. It's quiet, almost polite, and yet just as devastating. Love is not guaranteed. It requires attention, presence, and mutual growth. When it fades, there may be no villain, no betrayal, only the quiet erosion of connection. Respect it, cherish it, and understand that the absence of blame does not lessen the grief, only teaches you the fragility of the human heart. I